Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast, powered by Kasoon Car. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Orin Begum. Orin is a full-time lawyer turned part-time poet. Orin has attracted high-profile media attention for her poetry work, including the likes of the BBC. She currently works for a Magic Circle law firm, Clifford Chance, in London, sitting in their aviation, shipping and rail finance team. So, a very big welcome, Orin.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And before we go through all of that amazing work, we do have an icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which we ask our guests to answer, which is around suits. So on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, how real would you rate the TV series Suits in terms of its reality?
Is it bad if I say I haven't watched
No,
the series?
Tons of our guests have said they haven't seen it, so it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So based on that, you can just give it a 0.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I always get the Suits reference whenever I introduce myself to anybody new and say I'm a lawyer, and I just don't get it. So I would say 0.
Okay, fair enough. And that's a wise answer. So, look, we want to go through so many things today, and I think you and I connected through an article you're featured in via The Lawyer. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us a bit about your family background and your upbringing.
So I was born in a little village in Sylhet in Bangladesh. Sylhet is like a northern kind of region of Bangladesh. It's not in the capital. So I was born there, and at the time when I was born, actually, my dad was in the UK just trying to kind of gather up and save up enough money to kind of then bring over myself, my mum and my little sister. So we then moved to the UK when I was about 3 years old. Neither of my parents really or I knew any single word of English. So, starting off, it was quite difficult, going to schools, having to learn English, all of that kind of stuff. And then also having to move around a lot because obviously being an immigrant, you have to go where the work is. And that's what dad had to do. And we had to just basically follow him. So that meant before the age of 10, I'd gone to 5 different primary schools. And immigrant life, like everywhere, it's not easy. We weren't well off by any stretch of the imagination at all. And we were also rendered homeless at certain points. So it was a really difficult kind of upbringing because we just, we didn't have, disposable income. So we basically were living like paycheck to paycheck, really. And then obviously more siblings came along. We finally ended up kind of settling in Tower Hamlets. And because we were given a council flat here, I went to secondary school here. I finished my GCSEs here. And it's funny because where I live on the Isle of Dogs, I still live in the council flat today, but the only difference is my parents have managed to, gather enough money to actually buy it. But the funny thing is I've lived in the shadows of Canary Wharf for all my kind of formative years since about the age of 10, 26 now. So it's funny because I never really thought that, somebody like me from my kind of background going to a standard state comprehensive secondary school, whatever, I kind of really end up in Canary Wharf because there is a huge divide between the people who live on the island and the people who work in Canary Wharf. And I never thought I would be somebody to kind of bridge that gap. It's almost been like the American dream in a sense, like, coming from practically nothing to now, working for one of the biggest and best law firms in the world. It's not something I ever thought would happen to me or my family even thought would happen. But, I can only say, I've been very blessed and I've worked really hard to get to where I am.
And that's just such an amazing, inspiring story. The message I get from that is, anything is possible, regardless of where you start within reason. That's just such, amazing how far you've come. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So did you always want to be a lawyer? If not, what did you want to be?
I come from a South Asian background, so I guess my parents probably always wanted me to be a doctor. I mean, I was good at science, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed other things. I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a lawyer from an incredibly early age. I just knew it was something I kind of enjoyed. So when I was in year 8, so about the age of 13, 14, I took part in a magistrate's mock trial kind of competition thing to build my confidence, because before that I was extremely shy. I really didn't want to say anything in class. So my teachers encouraged me to do it as a kind of confidence building thing. I was chosen as the prosecution barrister. So I had to prepare a case, cross-examine witnesses, do all of that kind of stuff, and then present it in front of a real magistrates at Bow Magistrates Court. And so it was like a whole inter-school thing. So I was up against other schools and other students. And then I won my case. And I think that really gave me a kind of a direction to follow. Obviously, that was down the whole barrister route. Obviously, I'm clearly not a barrister now. But I think that was the first time I actually thought, wow, okay, this is something I'm good at and I enjoy. I like the skills involved. I like analysing things. I like questioning things, coming up with good, logical, concise arguments to convince people, all of that kind of stuff. I really enjoyed doing it. And I found out that I was good at it as well. So that really gave me a sort of direction to follow in terms of career. Obviously, then things happened and things took different turns. And, now I'm a solicitor and not a barrister. But I think that was the first time, so it was quite early on, I guess, in my kind of educational career about, when I was at the age of 13, 14, that I thought, okay, this is something I'm good at. Let's see where this takes me. I don't think it was until I finished my GCSEs and my A-levels that I kind of really started thinking, okay, well, maybe it is a possibility that I can actually end up somewhere, with a lot of influence. So, yeah.
Great. Well, I think, you've outlined that very, very well. So the other question, a lot of our listeners like to know is, how hard did you find it actually securing a training contract? We know, arguably, like you say, one of the best law firms in the world. Talk us through that journey.
So I was applying for training contracts in, I think, the Christmas of my second year at university. I mean, it was really hard. I mean, I guess like a lot of people, I just underestimated how much effort it takes and effort and time it takes, to do a really good training contract application. I think I did 7 applications. I got rejected from 6. So that was like a really big kind of reality check because they're really competitive. And when you haven't grown up in the circles to know kind of what to say, how to say it, how to present yourself, that kind of stuff, you haven't got a network. It is really difficult when you're kind of having to learn that kind of stuff from scratch. You've got an empty slate and you have to be able to populate it somehow. It was really difficult. I attended as many of the, on-campus workshops that different law firms had put on and stuff. But I think there's something to be said for having a network that is supportive and can actually give you the advice that you won't necessarily hear from, the mouths of recruiters or graduate recruitment or anybody like that. I think there's something to be said for that. It was really difficult. I mean, I applied for a vaccine at Clifford Chance and I got rejected from Clifford Chance. So yeah, exactly. So that was a really kind of, that was like heartbreaking because I think I had Clifford Chance up on my list from a very early kind of stage of my life. And I think by the time I got to university, it was kind of, I wanted, I just wanted to be at Clifford Chance. I felt like that's where I would get the best training. And when I got rejected from them, that really, really hurt. But I think one thing I've learned from my journey is to always try again. I don't know what it's been with me, but my entire life, anything I've ever wanted, I've had to try twice. And the second time round, I've had better luck. So I applied for the vacation scheme, got rejected after the assessment centre, was absolutely distraught. But funnily enough, I did a vaccine at a different firm and I really enjoyed it as well. So, but I did end up reapplying for the training contract at Clifford Chance. And then, by having better luck, a second time round, I managed to get the training contract, which I guess is the more important one out of the vaccine and the training contract. But it was a difficult it was a very difficult process of applying for training contracts. Having not come from a traditional background in terms of, I say in inverted commas, because, like I say, you don't know the jargon, you don't know what to say, you don't know how to say it, you don't know the types of conversations you should be having necessarily with lawyers and things like that. It was difficult, but I think what I got from it was perseverance, is that, you learn from the mistakes that you've made in the initial rounds, and then you improve upon them. And you also pester graduate recruitment for feedback because I believe a good graduate recruitment team does provide feedback. CC's team does try their best to provide feedback and to see as many candidates succeed as they can.
Yeah. And what I love about that is, and it's just the reality of life. If you're going to let knockbacks get you knocked back and down and out, then that's just the way it's going to be. You've got to get back on the horse and reapply. And that's a great success story of you with Clifford Chance. So tell us more about life at Clifford Chance. What do you enjoy most? How are you finding things with COVID-19 and how's that affecting you?
So, I mean, I'll start with my training contract. I think my training contract was intense. I mean, I didn't expect anything less. But yeah, it was, when you first come out of university and that's like your first real proper job, it is quite scary. But I think I definitely got the kind of exposure to clients, to really high profile deals, and really good work that I was expecting at Clifford Chance. So I definitely wasn't disappointed. I think one of the highlights of my training contract was in the assets team itself, working on a aviation finance for Bangladesh Biman. So that's the Bangladesh's national flag carrier. And they were acquiring their first kind of set of Boeing 787 Dreamliners from Boeing, and it's government owned, but essentially. So there's a lot of really high profile people on board, working for the financiers. It was a really, really good deal. And I think I did the closing call for the first aircraft, and we had representatives from Boeing and from Biman and from, Bangladesh government, all that kind of stuff. It was amazing for me because obviously I felt like I was coming full circle, having come from a really poor background, in a little village in Bangladesh, to now actually kind of helping them do such a huge and historic deal for the country. It felt like I was giving back something to my community, and it felt really good. It involved a lot of drafting and a lot of kind of communication with a lot of high profile people, and I never thought I'd get that. That was only in my second seat, so I felt incredibly privileged to be on a training contract that gave me that kind of exposure, and that kind of freedom to kind of run a deal like that. So that I had a really good time doing that. So my training contract was really good. I learned an incredible amount, and then I did an international secondment out in Frankfurt in the projects team, and I had a great time there, learned a lot. Yeah, it was a really great kind of training contract. I felt like I developed really solid skills that I needed to kind of excel as an associate. And then when it came around to qualifying, I was absolutely petrified because I was like, I was a trainee yesterday, now I'm an associate. Now people expect me to actually know stuff. So that was quite a difficult kind of transition. And I started during from the September to December kind of Christmas period, which was very busy. I prefer doing it that way around, throw yourself into the deep end, learn as much as possible, and then go forward. And now with COVID-19, I mean, it's like an unprecedented thing that I've never experienced something like that. A lot of the partners, I've spoken to haven't really experienced something like this either. So I think we're all kind of in the same boat. I think with the thing about being in asset finance, and especially in aviation, is that aviation obviously needs help right now. And so there is a lot of work going around, and a lot of people need our advice and our help. So I've been working from home since, I think, for about 2.5 months now. So we've been busy. We've had work come through. Even if it's not our traditional kind of stuff that we're doing, it's good because now is the time to see if all the drafting that we did, if it's tight enough, and if it actually works. So now is the time to put it to the test, right? So it's been a really, really interesting time to be a lawyer, especially so early on in my career. It's been speaking to the partners and stuff, they're saying that it's a really good time to actually develop really good skills and learn new things, and it really has. I've been drafting documents that I didn't think I'd ever be drafting. So it's been a really great experience. Obviously, I miss my colleagues, I miss the office, but yeah, it's been interesting, and I think there'll be a lot of lessons learned from this experience, both in terms of the work we do, but also how law firms function generally.
Yeah. Do you see Clifford Chance moving to remote 4-day working and 4 days of the week, or do you not see that happening ever?
I think, I mean, I can't be sure, but I think the partnership or the leadership generally has kind of really seen how working from home is not a bad thing. And I don't think necessarily they thought it was a bad thing before, but I think there was an element of uncertainty about how working from home would work. And clearly it has. We've done as much work, if not more, than we would run whilst we were in the office. And people have adjusted to it very well. We've got trainees still, and they've been adjusting to it as well. So it's, I think it's kind of really opened up the eyes of a lot of kind of more traditional kind of leadership, that, to show them that, working from home isn't a thing, reserved for the trendy startup type of company. Even big traditional companies like Clifford Chance and like other Magic Circle firms and big law firms, it's completely possible. As we've got a really good and strong IT team across the globe that are really supporting us, and all the other business support staff. They've been working night and day to make it possible. And here we are, 2.5 months, after the fact, and we're still doing really, really well. I can't be sure whether there'll be, the option for a 4-day week or whatever, but I think working from home, I think people will be way more comfortable kind of with that concept now that we've been doing it for so long and we've still been, making money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, an interesting debate that's going to go on and on because certain law firms, I think Denton's announced they've got the 4-day week till the end of the year. So it's just going to be, interesting to see how different firms of different sizes all react. But look, it's not all law in your world. So I said at the start, full-time lawyer, part-time poet. And so you've done so much amazing poetry work. So let's start there at the beginning as well. What inspired you to start poetry?
So I've always loved reading, whether it be poetry, whether it be prose. So I've always had my kind of head in a book all the time. And obviously studying poetry at GCSE, I loved reading it. But one thing I noticed was the lack of poets from a person of colour's point of perspective. I loved reading, obviously the traditional English classics and stuff. But I really wanted to see people with my type of name or my type of skin colour. I really like to see poetry from their perspective. And I never got to see that at GCSE or even afterwards. I studied English literature at A-level as well. Still didn't see that there. I've never written poetry myself before until the final year of university. And I just picked up a pen and I just had some really angsty feelings going on. And essentially it was like a word vomit on a page. And I had a really good time. And then, I wrote it and I just stuck it in the drawer and never looked at it again. Until I started my training contract. And I realized one day that, I haven't done something on a weekend for myself in a very long time because I was just so tired from the week. So one day I dragged myself and my brother out to Shoreditch where they were having an open mic night. And I just wanted to go and see what it was about. And it was an open mic night specifically for South Asian women. And my brother was like, well, you've written a poem, you go up and perform. And I was like, no. I was absolutely petrified to share something so kind of personal. But eventually I gathered up the courage to get up on stage and I shared my poem. It was the only one I'd ever written and I got such a great response. And people kept on asking me, do you have any social media? Can I follow you anywhere? All that kind of stuff. And, a few months later, once I'd been to a few more open mic nights, I started my poetry page. And I think it just all went from there. I entered the Asia House 2018 spoken word poetry slam. Again, not thinking anything would come of it. I just entered a poem that I'd written and, they picked it up and they were like, yeah, you're one of our finalists. And then the BBC got in touch and I was like, what's happening? And they were like, yeah, we'd love to cover your story, about your poetry and what inspired it and, and things like that. And I got coverage from the BBC and I was on one of their world news shows on their website. So it's been a really interesting journey. A journey that I never really expected. I just started it because, it was something I enjoyed. It was something so different from work. I loved, that it kept both things interesting. I had something really different from work. So then when I went to work, it was, work was still interesting. And then once I'd finished work, poetry was interesting. So it was just something I did because I enjoyed it. I didn't think anything would come of it. But since then, I've gotten commissions. I've gotten, paid opportunities to be headlining shows. So I've had a really interesting journey with poetry and it's been great, especially through Instagram, connecting with poets from not just the UK, but all of the world. And especially with the whole COVID-19 thing, doing virtual open mic nights has been really cool because obviously you get to connect with people from everywhere, not just people from the UK or from people from London. So it's been a really great journey and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's exploded for you, right? You've got thousands of followers, global audiences, and, you've had so much success. You're even being modest in the way that you described that. So let's dig into that because you're not shy of media appearances. You've had lots of exposure in the legal world. As I mentioned, you featured on The Lawyer recently and even broader, than that, BBC News. So I think it was, in fact, through that feature I mentioned at the top, we got in touch. But can you tell us more about that featured article on The Lawyer and what that was all about?
Yeah, so I think it was part of International Women's Day. At Clifford Chance, we celebrate International Women's Day all month long, which is great. So one of our Crescent Communications officers got in touch with me, telling me about this series that The Lawyer has for International Women's Day every year called Women Against Adversity. And they were like, we'd really, we know about your story and we'd really like for you to be featured as someone to represent TC. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I put together something and it got submitted to The Lawyer. And I was really surprised when it was chosen to be featured. And I think basically the article outlines essentially my story from beginning to end. Well, not even to end. I think I'm so early on in my career. I was surprised it was chosen. So it just, I outlined, like I say, from our conversation, when I moved here first, and then coming up against a lot of challenges. I live in one of the most deprived boroughs of the UK. So there are a lot of issues, not just financially, but, in terms of social issues, behavioral issues that were faced in school, how that prevented me from necessarily getting the kind of, attention from teachers that I necessarily needed to kind of achieve my potential, to even things like, for how finances almost stopped me from going to college. So I went to college between the years of 2010 and 2012. Between those years, the coalition government got formed, and I relied heavily on the educational maintenance allowance, which gave me money to kind of travel to college and buy books and all that kind of thing, all those kind of things that I needed. And when the coalition government came into power and they got rid of that, I really had to reevaluate my choices, because asking my parents for money just wasn't an option. They had, 4 other mouths to feed, a roof to keep over our heads, bills to pay. So I was just like, I'm not going to ask my parents for money. I just can't bring myself to do that. So I decided to work 3 jobs over the weekends to pay my way out. And I did that for 2 years. And it was hard. It was really, really hard, because obviously you're going to college. My college was 2 boroughs away. So I'd wake up at 6 a.m. every day, go to college, and then, work until about 9-10 p.m. at night, Monday to Friday, and then wake up again at, 8 a.m. on a Saturday and Sunday, and work 3 jobs to kind of just, maintain myself and be able to go to college. So that kind of stuff was really difficult. But looking back on it, obviously in hindsight, everything looks better. But at the time, it was really hard. But now I realize it kind of really taught me the value of money. When you don't work for your money, it's you kind of think it's not really a real tangible object, but it really is. It makes a huge difference to people's lives. And it really made me appreciate how much work and effort my parents had to go through to keep a roof over our head and, food in our stomachs. So that was a big thing. And then it just outlined my journey into university. So I was at Worcester College in Oxford studying law. But before that, when I applied, I got rejected at the interview round, and I was really, really upset. And like I was telling you, everything in my life I had to do twice to kind of get to succeed. So the first time when I interviewed, I got rejected, and I was really, really upset because I had my heart set on it. And then at the same time, I'd taken part in a mooting competition with the BPP School of Law. I think that's when they were first starting out, and their first prize was all expenses and fees paid place on their LLB program, and I managed to win that competition, and I didn't expect that. So I had a free ride to university on one hand, but in my heart of hearts, I knew I wanted to reapply to Oxford. So, everybody was telling me, don't take this year out, take BPP up on their offer, or one of the other unis you've got an offer from, don't do this, you don't want to risk it. And I didn't want to risk it. I was petrified, but in my heart of hearts, I knew if I didn't, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So I was like, I'm not going to listen to anybody. I'm not going to listen to my parents, my teachers, my friends. But I took a year out, and I reapplied to Oxford, and second time round, I had better luck, and I had, I managed to get a place at the college of my choice, and with a full scholarship. So I was like, I really didn't expect that at the end. I was just like, I just want to go to Oxford. I don't need a scholarship, but I got offered a full scholarship from the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies. So they paid all my fees and they gave me a maintenance allowance. So I managed to leave university with no debt, despite being the generation or the year that the coalition government increased the tuition fees. So I was in a very blessed position when I got into university and when I left. So it just outlines my entire journey, and it's about women against adversity. And there were so many barriers in my path, my finances, my religious background, my ethnic background, all of that kind of stuff that, in various contexts were barriers to me entering the law. But at every point, I had to think about it, and I was like, you know what, are you going to live the life that other people think you should live? Or are you going to live the life that you want to live? And obviously the latter was going to be much more difficult. But I think for certain people in this world, I think you're always going to have to take the path less trodden, and it's going to be harder, but eventually you get to where you want to be. And I think the whole point of my article was to say that even if you're in a position where you don't want to be in right now, and it's going to be a tough path and tough journey to get to where you want to be, it's always going to be worth it in the end. Otherwise, you look back at yourself in 10, 20 years' time and say, you know what, if only I'd made a different decision at that point, my life could be something else. And I never want to say that. So, you know, as hard as decisions can be, I took the more difficult decisions and traveled the less trodden paths. And, you know, I'm here I am today. And I'm only like a few months qualified. I'm still so early in my kind of career that I know there'll be difficult decisions to make in the future as well. But I'm just grateful that, in a way, that for all the hardships that did happen, because they taught me so much more than some of my counterparts would know at this point, you know, in terms of maturity, in terms of being able to deal with difficult situations. I think I'm in a very good position to do that going forward, having learnt the lessons I have. But it was a really great article. And then I got so much feedback and so many messages from so many different people who'd read it and said, this has been so inspiring. It's inspired me to continue my journey despite going through so many different things. And I was really overwhelmed with the amount of like messages and emails I was getting and phone calls I was getting from partners from all over the network. And I was just like, wow, I didn't know so many people read The Lawyer. And yeah, it was a really great response to have, because I felt I was really scared. You know, that was the first time I'd really outlined everything about my life in such a public way, and especially in a publication that a lot of the legal world and a lot of you know, people from work would be reading. I'd never, you know, spoken about those kind of things with many of my colleagues. So it was a really personal article. But I'm glad I did, because I feel like more of these conversations need to be had, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion in the law. There's so many invisible factors. You know, it's not just about gender and race and religion. It's, you know, there's so many invisible factors like socio-economic background, you know, that affects people getting into law as much as anything else. And these things aren't spoken about. And I feel like the conversation needs to be had. And that's why I was like, you know, as uncomfortable as it might seem, I have to get it out. The article was a product of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's where, you know, we were keen to give you a platform to kind of build on that as well, because I think it definitely is a conversation that needs to be had. And just some undertone messages from that. I completely agree. I mean, you know you best. So, you know, not necessarily your parents or influencers or friends. You know, myself, I've taken, you know, number of risks throughout my career that probably people have blinked or sort of thought or looked sideways. No way. I think you put that very nicely in terms of you've got to take the less trodden path. Because if you want to get to where your goals are, you're going to have to take some element of risk, and you've got to go all in and make it happen. So I just love the fact that, you know, you've managed to get from your situation to where you are now. It's a very commendable and inspiring story. So thanks for sharing that. And just as a sort of wrapping up on that perspective, what would you give as some sort of last pieces of advice to aspirational lawyers or current lawyers or even partners, just from your experiences that you'd like to share?
I get this question a lot, and I come from a very normal background. I don't feel like there's anything necessarily like I'm no different from anybody else. So I think the only thing I can tell people is like, if I can do it, if I can literally come from like nothing and still make it, I think anybody else can. It's just a matter of really wanting what you want. I think when you want something bad enough, that you'll take calculated and educated risk, and you will work night and day to make your dreams a reality. And I think it's really about asking yourself, how badly do I want this? And if you do want it bad enough, you will do what it takes to get to where you want to be. And even if that means being uncomfortable, like I say, I've not grown up in the traditional circles. It was really uncomfortable for me to learn how to network, to know what conversations to have with certain people. It was a really uncomfortable kind of journey for me, but it's only in those kind of uncomfortable, coming out of your comfort zones that you're going to grow. And so I think my advice is be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's where the growth happens and that's where your risks pay off. So just go out there and do whatever it takes to get to where you want. If you want it bad enough, that's the main thing. If you want it bad enough, you will do what it takes.
Yeah. It's mindset, isn't it, at the end of the day? I think you just need to block out the distractions, block out the negative people, not block out the naysayers, and just get on with it. So I just love that sort of mentality. So, you've got tons and tons of followers, you've got a massive online presence, but people who aren't already following you or following your social media, how can they get in touch? How can they follow you? Do you want to give a shout out?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. So I'm on Instagram at Poetry by Orini. Even if you type in my name, Orin Begum, it'll come up. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. So feel free to follow me and follow my poetry and my journey. I do spoken word pieces, I do written pieces. I do all sorts of different things. So get involved in the conversations that we're having and let's connect. I'm always up for speaking to different people, different perspectives. It's a great platform. Instagram especially is a great platform for people to connect from all walks of life. So please do go follow me, and let's join the journey together.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, thanks a million, Orin. You've been a fantastic guest. It was a real pleasure having you on, you talking through your journey. It truly was inspiring where you've come from and where you're still going. You know, you're still very early on to your career, as you say. So from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, we wish you tons and tons of success with your legal career and, of course, poetry work, and look forward to seeing what else you're going to be producing in the future. So from all of us, tons of success, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.